be continued in Beacon Pines. Revenge served second. Wait, I was even. No way. I refuse. Let's go back and find something more. Luca began to respond, but the sky answered for him as the clouds above began to break. This is a story about struggle. Luca he felt around his hands found, he yanked it free. Let Luca he heard with the muff. Luca was, he never. Chapter, everything. The next, only the sound. She leaned forward. Lucas, Mrs. Fratelli lifted. She carefully. Lucas, memories of. Master Nuncreed reached down and after the death of his father, each night, his mother would sit at the foot of his bed and hum a gentle. It was the only thing that could calm his mind. The only thing that, however briefly, could make it all seem okay. That melody pervaded every memory Luca had of his mother, shivering in the raw snow. He began to hum it out loud. Gran lowered the torch, listening closely. As recognition slowly set in, her heart sank. Those countless nights of consolation, the incomparable loss they shared together. She let the torch fall to the snow and sizzle out. A few steps toward Luca was all she could bear before dropping to the snow herself. Through a flood of tears, she began to hum along, note for note. Luca lifted his head in astonishment. The last time he heard that melody was the last night he saw his mother. Luca blinked through blurry, watery eyes, trying to see more clearly. He could just make out the impression of a familiar face. He peered across the snowscape at the woman on her knees. Something about her was undeniably his mother, only smaller, older, changed. Luca sprinted as fast as he could toward his mother. They held each other close, and the cold Eleanor looked down at Luca, tightening her embrace in an appeal for forgiveness. Joseph slumped into the cold, wet snow. For the first time in a long time, her voice felt like her own again. Luca gazed down at Nuncreed with pity. He looked small. Joseph stared into the snow, as if searching it for answers. Chapter after the devil you know. 7. Eleanor Van Horn crept down the maze of sterile hallways under Perennial Harvest. She stopped in front of the large steel door marked Deep Engineering. No turning back now. She raised a trembling hand. The stolen keycard worked as promised, and the door buzzed open with mechanical efficiency. She was immediately hit with the smell of disinfectant. It was some sort of laboratory. In one corner was a desk covered in papers. Across the room stood a tall metal pod with hoses protruding from its base. She rushed to the desk and began shifting through the piles of papers. They were experiment reports on something called Tempus Liquamen. There were dozens of them. Every one stamped failed. Eleanor heard the sharp echo of footsteps approaching. She was out of time. Her eyes scanned the room, eventually landing on the strange pod. Muttering a curse under her breath, she dashed over and dove inside. Mr. Kerr addressed the crowd with a sarcastic tone. Whispers filtered through the crowd. Torment dragged on Joseph Nuncrede's face. He paused for a moment, plucking a piece of fuzz from his sweater and discarding it to the ground. Kerr gave a bow of deference. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Solomon pulled a glass vial from his pocket. In one smooth motion, he downed its contents. A triumphant smile grew across Solomon's lips. His body and face began to contort and expand as he disappeared into a belching green mist. A hushed horror gripped the crowd. This is a story about change. Sharper examined his new hands. Sharper choked out a crude, frustrated grumble sprinkled through the crowd. William Kerr gave a subtle nod. helpless quiet settled over the crowd. Sharper addressed the crowd with indignant pride. He'd planned this moment for so long that now, at the deed's fruition, it almost felt frivolous. Mr. Kerr flourished a preposterously elaborate bow. Sharper coughed up one final laugh and cracked his knuckles. And so, Sharper set about remaking the town in his own image. The fertilizer factory soon reopened for business. Sales rose steadily, as more and more farmers across the countryside began to swear by its miraculous property. Beacon Pines became famous, a secretive town that, for the right price, shared its gifts with all. Gifts that became more and more necessary in a world where winters grew longer and longer. This is wrong, but things are becoming clearer now. You can feel it, right? We can't let Sharper win. He might just be the key to this whole thing. Let's see. Luca felt the weight of Nuncrete's hand on his shoulder. Something wasn't right. He didn't know why, but something was telling Luca to get out of there. Luca twisted free of Nuncrete's grasp. The two scurried off, eager. Luca tied a small fishing with the law of attraction. Luca placed a sinker on the... Sometimes the best stuff is at the bottom of the... Luca wrapped a twig of thyme around the hook. Some fish have refined taste. Luca wrapped a twig of thyme. Some fish have... He aired a long holler into the woods. Luca felt his eyes getting heavy, and he conceded to its lumpy embrace. Once again, Luca found himself in a vast black expanse. This time, he knew exactly where to go. He took a single confident step forward. The world flickered and pulsed. He found himself standing in front of the frigid air of a source. He plopped down cross-legged and gazed into the cold flame. Soon enough, the fire began to die out, popping sporadically, until all that was left was a single ember. Luca stood up and dusted himself off. He plucked the glowing ember from the cold ash, examined it, and slid it into his pocket, a keepsake. The voice of his father spoke behind him. "You made me proud, Buckaroo." Luca turned to face him. "Dad, what is this place?" A warm grin grew across his father's face. "A place where everything that has been and everything that could be all wait together." Luca found himself staring at his father's face, trying as hard as he could to memorize every single detail. "Wait? For what?" Another voice spoke out as Luca's doppelganger stepped forward. "That's up to you." Without knowing why, Luca began to weep. Is any of this real? Are you real?" Luca's father bent down to smudge away a tear. "Of course. I'm as real as the part of you that misses me." Luca turned to look at the older version of himself. "And you?" The doppelganger choked back tears. "I'm as real as the part of you that's angry he's gone." Does that make sense? Through his tears, Luca laughed. "I think so." His father pulled him in for an embrace. "Time to go, Buckaroo." Luca was startled from his dream by a banging on the floor. A commanding voice rumbled from below. Just as Luca sprang to lock the entry hatch, the door knocked open. Chapter Dangers Big. Luca stumbled back. He heard the rope ladder creak under significant weight. Keeping his eyes fixed on the hatch, he inched backward to the balcony. As his hand grasped the door handle, Luca froze. A large figure clumsily wriggled up through the hole. The large figure cocked its head inquisitively. Luca's jaw. He peered more closely at the man standing in front of him. Something about him was undeniably Rollo, only bigger, older, changed. Rollo proudly presented his hands to Luca. Luca moved to the side and pointed Rollo to his reflection in the balcony window. His hands shot up to his face. Rollo shut up. With a yelp, Rollo dove behind Luca. She shot a nervous glance at Rollo. Beck's eyes narrowed. Ilona tried to put on a smile. She sighed, and after a moment, looked down at Beck sympathetically. She flashed a sly grin and tousled Beck's hair. Luca gave Rollo a quick elbow to the ribs. Beck flicked a large sheet of paper out of her pocket and slammed it on the floor. Rollo started to wiggle with excitement. Chapters: The Heist. They spent the night's end huddled around that small map, formulating a plan to infiltrate the headquarters of Perennial Harvest. It would be no small feat. A modern facility equipped with all manner of technology, not to mention the swarm of clipboards that would most certainly be scattered throughout. By the time the sun began to peek through the car window used as a makeshift balcony door, all were in agreement. This could just work. The final day before the festival would be used to prepare. They'd need to pool every resource at their disposal, pull every favor with a thread, even enlist some unsavory characters around town with important tasks only they were suited for. Luckily, there was enough ill will and mistrust toward Perennial Harvest that alliances could be found at a bargain. Luca, Beck, and Rollo rubbed their eyes as they exited the treehouse. They hadn't slept at all that night. There was no time. The festival was to begin in one day, and they each had their assignments. He waved vaguely at Rollo's sizable figure. Beck snorted an involuntary giggle. Looked at each other with sleepy confidence and nodded. Jeff wheezed out a long snicker. The joy in Jeff's face drained instantly. Looking into the sullen eyes of his would-be accomplice, Luca blurted out the first word that came to mind. Luca wasn't. He shouted out Jeff's brow perked up. Sensing some traction, Luca carried on with vigor. Jeff's scowl faded with a sigh. One good stomp of the foot was all Jeff needed. Luca offered out his open hand to see. With a firm and dusty grip, Jeff reciprocated. eyebrows suspiciously. Iggy gave a reluctant shrug. Iggy considered the point. Luca knew that he tried. Iggy gave a Iggy considered the point. A wild-eyed grin spread across Iggy's face. Iggy glanced over to Tish, who nodded in agreement. With a quick nod, Luca was off. Iggy gazed up at Tish with a smile. A single tear ran down Tish's cheek. Chapters into the... A good heist requires preparation, and thorough preparation takes time, something they had precious little of. So far, everything was in order. Jeff, Iggy, and Tish all agreed to do their part. Beck radioed Luca that night with a simple and covert message. "We are locked and loaded on my end." And Rollo, after a lengthy confession, managed to persuade Roxy and Fitz to help. He stowed away in mission control for the night to avoid attracting attention. Rollo, being uniquely suited for the role, would be the first to breach Perennial Harvest. The outfit provided by Jeff wasn't perfect, but a convincing disguise is 10% wardrobe, 90% confidence. Rollo took a few vigorous breaths and shook out his arms. He had to think quick. Rollo sighed, adjusting his tool belt. With a stroke of his mustache, Rollo proceeded it. He stammered and flipped. Rollo interrupted with urgency in his voice. Rollo panicked. The distraction was enough for Rollo to... The clipboard fumbled around. Solomon stopped. A veneer of confusion flashed across Solomon's face. His words... Solomon's facade briefly faltered. Luca happened to notice above the door. Luca tried the handle. Solomon leaned forward to examine the mechanism. Luca smiled. She mimed a quick hat tip and ambled up. The light on the keypad changed. Luca switched on his... On the computer screen, a green cursor blinked in a password field. Luca pecked out his best guess. The screen blinked to life. Columns of green numbers glowed on a black background. Solomon's jaw clenched into a half smile. Luca quickly scanned the columns for number 24601. Once again, in that moment of distraction, he quickly skimmed. Mr. Kerr approached with self-satisfaction. He Nellie leaned over to Nellie sighed. Solomon muttered inaudibly. Luca tugged on each. hand up to the ashtray. With a subtle, quivering lip, Solomon once again muttered. They heard the trampling of frantic foot. Her eyes searched. Solomon watched eagerly, waiting for the flicker of epiphany. With a sickened look, she peered into his soul. Solomon clapped with genuine delight. Solomon glanced down, examining. Kerr presented. Before he could finish, Rollo casually tossed the vial to Luca. Luca jiggled the vial, mocking. She held it tightly. Solomon sighed. He pursed his lips with faint. A deep uncertainty washed over Beck. She looked to. With a dispirited nod, Beck slowly approached Solomon. With apprehension, Solomon pocketed the vial and brushed off it. The blood drained from Kerr's face. Solomon shook his head with. A muffled applause resonated faintly. Nellie was staring at the floor. The color dropped. Luca was overwhelmed. A sudden explosion. Chapter Comeuppance. Ears still ringing, Gran picked herself up off the ground. Through the dust and smoke, she looked over to see Mrs. Fratelli helping Hiram Tolliver to his feet. She'd had to beg, borrow, and steal to acquire those explosives. How many nights had she spent visualizing how she'd use them to make things right? And now, her one shot at destroying the source, that damned hole that swallowed so much of her life, was gone. Traded for this jagged hole in a wall and a foolhardy shot at rescuing Roland. With Fratelli and Tolliver at her side, it was a strange feeling. The last time she'd stalked this maze of hallways, it was in a different body. They quickly rounded a corner to find a group of clipboards guarding a door. Something worth guarding is probably something worth seeing. She leapt forward, brandishing her cane. If her last chance at vengeance for things lost was truly gone, she would just have to fight to keep what she... They made their way out from deep. Solomon pulled a... In one smooth motion, he downed its contents. A triumphant smile. With a mischievous look, Beck elbowed Luca. Remember when I had the vial behind my back? I might have tweaked his wonder potion with a little change. His body and face began to Eris awkwardly cradled. She looked to her brother, her voice... She looked back down at the infant with equal parts kindness and terror in her eyes. With a shake of her head, Eris addressed the crowd with a stern scowl. At the Beacon Pines' coldest, folks shared what they had, and none were left wanting. The new school year was ushered in by the falling leaves of autumn. After everything Luca, Rollo, and Beck had been through, middle school was bearable. The chill of winter didn't seem to bother people much. They kindled a hope for a better future in their hearts. When spring arrived, farmers planted their crops with a sense of joy and optimism. And as the dawn of the first day of summer came again, its light slowly spread through the shallow valley. It crept over the town square, across the river, past the neglected welcome sign, and came to rest on a young boy sleeping at dawn, his mind at peace, knowing he is here for a reason. Over time, Eleanor began moving Walt's old things out of the closet and into storage. Eleanor had moved back into her bedroom, and now that she wasn't sneaking out late, she even slept there most nights. saw a few visitors. When Perennial Harvest collapsed, most of the clipboards skipped town, but some stuck around and dedicated themselves to making things right. Luca stuck a those things always get dirty. Luca squinted, memories of it. Mr. Nuncreed shook his head. With Perennial Harvest gone, the transportation tubes were left unused. Well, maybe not. honestly, I began to look, then you came along. I don't know exactly how to thank you. It's hard to explain how much this means to me. It's funny, now that our time together is finally ending. I'm at a loss for words. Let's just watch the end together.